The lifeguard who did not know she was the journalist writing his story. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The ocean was calm that morning, the kind of blue that hides danger beneath its beauty. Ethan Cole, a lifeguard who had spent almost a decade on this stretch of California coast, squinted toward the horizon. His tanned arms rested on the rescue board, salt drying on his skin, the sun slowly climbing behind him. To most people, he was just a local hero who had once pulled 3 children from a riptide last summer, the video of that rescue going viral overnight. But to Ethan, he was just doing his job. Fame was noise, saving lives was the work. Still, that viral moment had changed everything. Journalists, sponsors, and even politicians had tried to turn him into a symbol, a brand. He hated that word. Which was exactly why he had refused every interview since. That is, until she showed up. Lila Grant stepped onto the sand wearing oversized sunglasses, a white shirt over her swimsuit, and a press badge tucked deep in her tote bag where no one could see. She told her editor she would get the truth behind the viral hero of Malibu. What she did not tell him was that her career was on the line. One more failed feature, and she would be done. So when a small local TV crew mistook her for Ethan's fiancée during a charity event rehearsal, she did not correct them. She smiled politely, nodded once, and suddenly found herself being introduced as Lila Cole. Ethan froze when he heard it. Fiancée? He repeated, stunned, his brown eyes narrowing. Lila's pulse jumped, but she improvised quickly. Long story, she whispered through her smile. I can explain later. Cameras flashed, people clapped, and before Ethan could stop it, a reporter shouted, "Tell us how you two met." For a second, he almost denied it, then he saw the nervous woman beside him, clearly cornered, and something about her panic reminded him of the drowning faces he had pulled from the wave. She could not let her drown too. So he placed a steady arm around her shoulders and said calmly, "At the beach, of course. Where else?" The crowd laughed, charmed. Lila looked up at him, half in shock, half in gratitude. And in that single heartbeat, a lie was born. That night, in the quiet after the event, Ethan confronted her near the lifeguard tower, the waves glowing pale under the moonlight. You want to tell me who you really are? He asked. Lila hesitated. The truth that she was a journalist sent to expose him as a fake burned on her tongue. But she swallowed it. I just needed to help you out there, she said softly. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fine. But if we are going to pretend, we do it by my rules. She blinked. Pretend? You started it, he said. We might as well finish it. There is a charity gala this weekend. They will expect my fiancé, you in? The ocean wind caught her hair as she met his eyes. A fake engagement? Exactly, he said, folding his arms. Think of it as a contract. She exhaled slowly, caught between relief and dread. She needed this story, but she was no longer sure she could survive it. All right, she whispered. Deal. He extended his hand. She shook it. Lightning flickered far out over the water, unseen by both of them, foreshadowing the storm that was about to come. The following morning, the beach was quiet except for the cry of distant gulls and the hum of waves rolling onto the shore. Ethan arrived early, as he always did, carrying his rescue board under one arm and a coffee in the other. But this morning, his thoughts were not on the tides or the wind. They were on her. Lila Grant. The woman who had walked into his world like a sudden wave and left him wondering whether to run or dive in. He replayed her words from last night. A fake engagement. A contract. He had agreed because he needed to control the chaos. The charity gala in 2 days was too big to risk another media circus. If pretending to have a fiancé would keep the cameras away from his family, then so be it. Still, he hated lies, even harmless ones. Lila, meanwhile, sat in her car parked along the boardwalk, typing on her laptop with the sea breeze whipping her hair. Her editor's message blinked across the screen: get inside his world, find the cracks. We need the truth behind the hero act. She stared at the words until they blurred. Something about Ethan had already begun to pull at her conscience. He did not act like a man chasing fame. When she had watched him scanning the horizon last evening, his eyes searching for danger no one else saw, she realized there was nothing staged about that kind of focus. Her phone buzzed again. It was him. Meet me at Seaside Cafe, 10 o'clock. We need to discuss terms. Her pulse skipped. She shut her laptop and went. The cafe was small, overlooking the water. Ethan was already there, sitting by the window, a folder on the table. His posture was straight, almost military, but his voice was calm when she sat down. Before we go any further, he said, sliding a piece of paper toward her, we set ground rules. She looked down and read aloud. Rule 1: no real feelings. Rule 2: you stay until the end of the Ocean Guardian Gala this Saturday. Rule 3: no media exposure beyond what we control. Rule 4: we respect each other's privacy. Her brow arched. And Rule 5? He leaned back, eyes steady. We tell no one it is fake. Not even your friends. If this story leaks, it destroys us both. Lila folded her arms. You make it sound like we are signing a business deal. That is exactly what it is, he replied. I have seen what the spotlight can do to people. I will not let it happen again. She hesitated, her voice softening. You really hate attention that much? He gave a dry laugh. Attention gets people killed. Distraction, ego, performance, they do not belong on the beach. There was something in his tone that silenced her. She signed the paper, her hand trembling slightly. All right, she said. We have a deal. He nodded, then stood. Good. We start today. The press will expect to see us together before the gala. Today? She asked, startled. Yes, he said, handing her a spare hoodie from his bag. You are coming with me on patrol. Her eyes widened. Patrol? I cannot even swim. Then stay close, he said with a faint smile. That is Rule 6. Hours later, the sun was high and the ocean shimmered like glass. Lila followed Ethan along the shoreline, camera crews in the distance capturing Brawl for the upcoming event. She tried to look natural, but every time he looked her way, her stomach tightened. He carried himself with an ease that made her forget she was supposed to be observing him, not feeling drawn to him. When he dove into the surf to help a struggling surfer, she ran after him without thinking, shouting for help. The rescue was quick, efficient, instinctive. When he carried the shaken teenager back to shore, she saw no cameras, no ego, just a man doing what he was born to do. The boy's mother sobbed with gratitude. Ethan simply smiled and said, he will be fine. Lila stood there in silence, heart pounding, realizing her story was already changing. This was no hoax. No act. She was writing about a man who saved lives while trying to protect his own. As the sun began to set, Ethan tossed her a towel and said quietly, you did well for your first day. She laughed, breathless. I did not drown, that is a win. He smiled, the first real one she had seen. Maybe there is hope for you yet, Miss Grant. For the first time, she wondered if her biggest lie was not the fake engagement, but pretending her heart was not already involved. By the next morning, the story of the lifeguard and his mysterious fiancé had already reached every corner of town. Headlines filled social media, and photographers waited near the beach hoping to capture a glimpse of them together. Ethan hated the noise, but he stayed composed. If this was the price of peace, he would endure it. Lila, however, woke up to dozens of missed calls from her editor. She ignored them all. The article draft she had started felt wrong now. Every sentence she wrote sounded like betrayal. The day began with Ethan pulling up in his old red Jeep outside her rented apartment near the pier. He leaned out the window and said, "Come on, Miss Grant. We have errands to run." She joined him reluctantly, tucking her recorder deep in her purse, though she no longer knew why she carried it. They drove along the coast in easy silence until he stopped at a small market. Inside, everyone seemed to know him. He greeted the cashier by name, helped an elderly man carry groceries to his car, and bought a bag of fresh apples for the rescue team. No camera followed him. No one asked for a picture. It was all real. Back in the Jeep, Lila finally asked, "Why do you do all this? You do not owe these people anything." He shrugged, eyes on the road. "When the tide turns against you, you hope someone will still reach out a hand. I guess I am just trying to be that hand." His words stayed with her all afternoon. Later, at the lifeguard station, Ethan introduced her to the rest of the crew. A few teased him gently about his fiancée, and she played along, smiling through the awkwardness. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in orange and pink, the team packed up. Ethan motioned for her to follow him to the tower balcony overlooking the ocean. "There is something I want to show you," he said. From a wooden box, he pulled out an old photograph of two teenage boys standing beside a lifeguard tower, grinning under the summer sun. One was Ethan. The other, she realized, looked almost identical but younger. "My brother," Ethan said quietly. "He drowned 12 years ago. I was supposed to be watching him." Lila's breath caught. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "You were kids. It was not your fault." He shook his head. "It does not matter how many lives I save. I will never forget the one I lost." The sound of the waves filled the silence. She reached out instinctively and touched his hand. "Maybe saving others is his way of still being here," she said softly. Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable, then gave a small nod. "Maybe." The moment lingered longer than it should have. When she got home that night, Lila could not sleep. She opened her laptop, stared at the empty document titled "The Truth Behind the Hero," and instead of notes, she began typing what felt like a confession. He is not a fraud. He is a man carrying the weight of a promise he could never keep. She stopped halfway, realizing that the story she was writing was no longer for the world, it was for him. The following day, the gala preparation began. Designer suits, floral arches, reporters setting up by the ballroom entrance. Lila arrived wearing a pale blue gown that caught the light like water. Ethan stood waiting at the top of the stairs, formal for once in a dark suit, his tan skin contrasting sharply against the crisp white shirt. For a second, he simply stared. "You look different," he said finally. She smiled, a little nervous. "Good different?" "Better than good," he replied quietly. Cameras flashed as they descended together, hand in hand. Every gesture was rehearsed, every glance meant for show until their eyes met and neither could remember the act anymore. When the host asked them to share how they met, Lila hesitated, then spoke with a steady voice. "Sometimes life brings people together for the wrong reasons. But if you stay long enough, you might find the right ones." The audience applauded warmly, believing it was all romance. Ethan looked at her, realization flickering in his eyes. Somewhere between pretending and protecting, something very real had taken root. As music filled the ballroom and reporters surrounded them, Lila felt a truth she could no longer deny. The story she had come to write had changed. She was no longer the observer. She was the one being written. That night, after the gala ended, the world around them blurred into flashes of light and polite applause. Ethan and Lila left through the side entrance, escaping the reporters still shouting questions about their engagement. Outside, the ocean breeze was cool against her skin, carrying the faint music of waves colliding with the shore. Ethan loosened his tie and exhaled. "You handled that crowd better than I did," he said with a tired smile. Lila laughed softly. I think you are just not used to attention. That is one thing I never want to get used to, he replied. They walked along the empty boardwalk, the city lights fading behind them, and for the first time since their strange arrangement began, the silence between them felt comfortable. When they reached the lifeguard tower, Ethan leaned against the railing, staring out over the dark water. You know, he said after a moment, my brother used to say the ocean remembers. Every wave carries something it has taken. Lila looked at him quietly, sensing the weight in his voice. Do you believe that? Maybe, he said. But sometimes it gives something back, too. The words lingered between them like an unspoken promise. The following days became a blur of new routines. They posed for interviews, appeared at fundraisers, and shared quiet dinners after long days by the water. Each time Ethan looked at her, something in his expression softened. For Lila, it became harder to separate duty from feeling. She found herself memorizing small things, the way he pushed his hair back when nervous, the calm steadiness in his hands when he spoke to children at the rescue camp, the low warmth in his voice when he laughed. Her recorder remained buried in her purse, untouched. The article her editor demanded was now weeks overdue. Every time he called, she let it ring until it stopped. But the truth could not stay hidden forever. On a gray afternoon, as the storm clouds gathered over the horizon, Ethan invited her to meet him at the beach. He stood by the lifeguard tower with a sealed envelope in his hand. I want to make this official, he said. If we are going to keep pretending, we should have terms in writing for the Foundation's records. She blinked in surprise. Terms? A formal agreement, he said, offering the envelope. You are free to read it. Inside was a short typed document, a simple contract detailing the length of their public relationship and a clause about privacy after it ended. His signature was already at the bottom. Her hands trembled slightly as she read it. You thought of everything, she murmured. It is not about control, he said gently. It is about protecting what matters. She looked up at him. And what is that? He hesitated before answering. The truth. The rain began to fall in soft streaks, soaking the sand around them. Lila folded the paper carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. I will sign it, she said, her voice steady but quiet. He nodded, handing her his pen. She signed, unaware that the tiny red light of her forgotten recorder inside her purse had blinked to life when the wind brushed against it. Every word, his voice, her confession, the contract was captured. Neither of them noticed. When they finally walked back to the jeep, drenched and laughing, it felt almost like a beginning rather than an agreement. That night, Lila sat by her apartment window, watching the rain streak across the glass. Her heart felt heavy with something she could not name. The file on her laptop still sat open, the headline blinking at the top. Hero or hoax, it read. She closed the laptop gently and whispered to herself, not a hoax. Across town, Ethan placed the signed contract into a small metal box beside his brother's photograph. For him, it was a promise of peace, a boundary he could trust. For her, it was a ticking clock. Neither of them could imagine how quickly that line between fiction and reality was about to break. The ocean outside roared louder that night, as if warning them that no matter how carefully written can stay safe forever. The next morning brought a strange calm after the storm. The ocean was glassy, too still, as if it were holding its breath. Ethan arrived early at the beach, running his usual patrol, but something in him felt different. He kept replaying last night in his mind, the sound of the rain, Lila's voice, the softness in her eyes when she said she would sign the contract. Somewhere deep down, he knew this was no longer just an arrangement. At the same time, across town, Lila sat in the newsroom staring at the blinking cursor on her computer screen. Her editor stood over her shoulder, impatient. Lila, we gave you this assignment 6 weeks ago. Where is the story? He demanded. She swallowed hard. It is not ready yet. Not ready? He scoffed. You have everything you need. The public wants the truth about that so-called hero. Either you deliver it tonight, or you can clear your desk tomorrow. The words hit like a wave. She nodded quietly, pretending to agree, but inside she felt like she was betraying something sacred. That evening, she drove to the beach to clear her head. Ethan was there, repairing one of the rescue boards under the tower. He smiled when he saw her, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. "You look like you could use some air," he said. "Mind helping me wax this board?" She joined him, and for a while, the world felt simple again. Two people, sand under their feet, salt on their skin, laughter caught in the wind. But when she glanced at her phone, a notification blinked on the screen. A message from her editor: "The front page is yours if you file the story by midnight." She locked the phone and tried to focus on Ethan's voice. He was telling her about the upcoming youth rescue camp, his dream of teaching kids about ocean safety for free. "That is why the foundation matters," he said. "It is not about fame. It is about giving them what my brother never had: a second chance." She wanted to tell him everything right then, the truth about who she was and why she had come, but the words stuck in her throat. Before she could speak, a group of local reporters approached, cameras already recording. "Ethan Cole," one shouted, "there are rumors you are using your foundation to promote your relationship. Is it real or a publicity stunt?" Ethan froze, his jaw tightening. Lila's heart dropped. She stepped forward quickly, her hand finding his. "We do not owe anyone an explanation," she said firmly. The cameras kept rolling. "So you confirm the engagement is real?" another asked. Ethan looked at her, his expression conflicted, then said softly, "Yes. It is real." The reporters erupted in questions, but Ethan pulled her away and led her to the Jeep. They drove in silence for a long while. Finally, he parked near the pier and turned to her. "You did not have to defend me like that," he said quietly. "They were attacking you," she replied. "I could not just stand there." He studied her face, the sincerity in her eyes, and sighed. "Thank you." The tension broke, and he reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. "You know," he murmured, "you are not terrible at pretending." She smiled faintly. "Neither are you." Their laughter faded into silence, and for a moment, time stopped. He leaned in, hesitated, then kissed her soft, uncertain, real. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. Lila whispered, "Ethan, there is something I need to tell you." But before she could continue, his radio crackled to life with an urgent call: a missing child near the rocks south of the pier. He was already moving. "Stay here," he said. "I will be back." She watched him sprint toward the surf, the red rescue float cutting through the dark water. Within minutes, he reached the boy clinging to a buoy, pulled him to safety, and carried him ashore as the crowd cheered. Cameras flashed again, recording everything. Lila's chest tightened. She knew what she had just witnessed: courage, instinct, truth. But by morning, that same footage would belong to the network. Her editor would twist it into the headline he had always wanted: "The hero exposed." She felt sick as she walked away from the beach, knowing she could not hide the truth much longer. The storm outside had passed, but the real one was just beginning. The next day began with sunlight glinting off the water, but neither of them felt its warmth. The rescue from the night before had made Ethan a local legend once again. Every news station replayed the footage of him diving into the stormy surf to save the child. Headlines called him a hero, but Ethan only felt the familiar unease that came whenever the spotlight returned. He avoided interviews, kept his radio off, and focused on repairing equipment at the lifeguard station. When Lila arrived, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "You saved that boy's life," she said softly. "You should be proud." Ethan glanced at her, his expression weary. "I did what anyone would have done." "No," she said, stepping closer. "Most people would have waited for help. You did not." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "That does not make me a hero, Lila. It just means I got lucky this time." The word hero hit her harder than he knew. It was the same word her editor had demanded she question in her article. Her guilt had grown unbearable. She wanted to tell him the truth right there, but before she could, his phone rang. He answered curtly, listened, then frowned. "That was the foundation board," he said. "They want me at headquarters. Apparently, there is a journalist claiming to have inside information about me. They are worried about bad press." Lila's heart froze. She knew immediately who that journalist was supposed to be. The recorder in her purse, the one that had accidentally captured their conversation about the contract, must have been accessed somehow. Her laptop had been synced to the newsroom's cloud. The file was already out. She tried to speak, but the words refused to come. "Ethan, she began. He cut her off gently. "It will be fine. People talk. I have nothing to hide." But when they arrived at the foundation office, the truth hit them both. A giant screen displayed the leaked audio, his voice discussing the fake engagement contract, followed by Lila's confession that she had signed it to protect him. Gasps filled the room. A board member turned off the recording and said coldly, "So it was all a publicity stunt. You misled donors and the press. The Ocean Guardian campaign is suspended until further notice." Ethan stood frozen. His gaze turned toward Lila, confusion and disbelief flooding his face. "What is this?" he asked quietly. "Ethan, I swear, I did not what?" he interrupted, his voice rising. "Record me? Lie to me? Pretend to care?" She shook her head desperately. "It was an accident. I never meant for it to be published." "But you did record it," he said, the hurt in his voice deeper than anger. "Why? For your article?" The silence between them was louder than the surf outside. Lila felt tears sting her eyes. "At first, yes. But then everything changed. I changed." Ethan stepped back as if the space between them was the only thing keeping him standing. "You knew what that story would do to me. You knew what it would do to this foundation, to the people who trusted me." "I tried to stop it," she said. "Please, you have to believe me." He looked at her one last time, his eyes filled with betrayal. "I believed in you, Lila. That was my mistake." He turned and walked out, leaving her standing amid the wreckage of everything she had built. Outside, reporters had already gathered, their cameras flashing, shouting questions she could not answer. She pushed past them, her heart pounding, her breath short. By the time she reached her car, the tears finally came. She had wanted to write the truth, but in the end, she had only destroyed the one person who had ever trusted her completely. That night, Ethan sat alone by the ocean, staring into the endless dark. The wind whipped around him, cold and sharp. He thought of his brother, of promises, of lies. Maybe this was the ocean taking something back again. The waves rose higher, crashing against the rocks, each one erasing footprints until nothing remained but silence. Days passed, and the world moved on, but for Ethan and Lila, everything had stopped. The foundation suspended its programs, donations froze, and the beach where they had once laughed together now felt like a ghost of what had been. Ethan kept working quietly, alone, still patrolling the water, still saving strangers, but never speaking to reporters again. Lila, meanwhile, had left the newsroom. Her article had been published without her consent, twisted by her editor into a scandal piece that painted Ethan as a manipulative fraud. She tried to issue a correction, but it was too late. The internet had already decided what to believe. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, she drove to the pier, clutching a small notebook in her lap. Inside were her handwritten notes, the truth she had meant to tell, the story of the man behind the hero headlines. She stood at the end of the pier, the wind pulling at her hair, and whispered, "I am sorry." Her voice was lost in the surf. At the same moment, Ethan sat on the steps of the lifeguard tower, staring out at the waves that shimmered gold in the dying light. His radio crackled with static, the voice of another guard breaking through. "All clear, Ethan. Quiet night." He turned it off. For once, he did not want quiet. He wanted understanding. He wanted her. But every time he thought of her face, all he could see was betrayal. The next morning, he attended the emergency board meeting of the foundation. The members argued about dissolving the organization altogether, their faith shaken. Ethan stood finally and said, "You can shut down the foundation if you must, but do not let my mistakes erase what we built. The ocean still needs us." There was a silence, then reluctant agreement to keep the program under temporary review. As the meeting ended, Ethan walked out, drained but resolute. Outside, a small crowd of volunteers waited. One of them, a teenage boy he had rescued months ago, handed him a folded note. "A woman dropped this off earlier," the boy said. Ethan opened it. Inside was a single sentence in Lila's handwriting, "The truth is coming." That night, Lila uploaded her own video confession to the internet. No editor, no network, just her voice over raw footage she had filmed of Ethan saving lives. She told the world how the recording had been stolen, how her story had been twisted, and how Ethan had never used the foundation for fame. "If you want to know who he is," she said, "look at the water. That is where he belongs, saving, not performing." The clip spread faster than the scandal ever had. People began to question the earlier reports. By dawn, the headlines had changed from accusation to apology. Ethan watched it all from the station computer, his eyes softening as her voice filled the room. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to hope. Still, he did not call her. The damage between them ran deeper than public opinion. But somewhere beneath the surface, like a tide waiting for its moment, forgiveness was beginning to rise. The following week, the ocean returned to its rhythm, and so did life along the coast, but something had changed. People greeted Ethan again, not with suspicion, but with quiet respect. Donations to the foundation slowly resumed, and the volunteers returned, their faith restored by the video Lila had released. Yet, even as everything began to heal, Ethan avoided the spotlight. He declined interviews and refused to speak about the scandal. To him, the redemption that mattered was not publicity, it was personal. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the waves glowed amber, he noticed movement near the shoreline. A woman was walking along the wet sand, barefoot, her shoes dangling from her hand. Lila. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes uncertain. "You saw the video," she said softly. Ethan nodded once. "I did. I meant every word," she continued. "I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted people to see the truth." He studied her face, the exhaustion behind her smile, the sincerity that no camera could fake. "You did not have to fix it," he said quietly. "You owed me nothing." "I did owe you," she replied. "Because I am the one who broke it." For a moment, the only sound between them was the tide rolling in. Then Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and silver, the recorder she had once used. He had found it washed up near the tower days after the scandal. He placed it in her hand. "You came here for a story," he said. "You might as well have the ending." Her eyes filled with tears. "I do not want the ending," she whispered. "I just want a chance to start again." Ethan looked at her, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. "Then let us start with this," he said, pointing toward the sea. "Come on. You still owe me a swim." She laughed through her tears. "You know I can barely float." "Then stay close," he said with a small grin. They walked into the water together, the waves lapping at their legs. Lila hesitated as the water rose around her, but Ethan's hand was there, steady and warm, guiding her forward. "Do not fight it," he told her. "Just breathe." She closed her eyes and did as he said, feeling the salt on her lips, the pull of the tide, the rhythm that had always belonged to him. For a brief moment, it felt like the ocean itself had forgiven them. When they returned to shore, the last light of day glimmered on the horizon. Ethan looked at her and said quietly, "You know, when I met you, I thought you were trouble." "You were not wrong," she said, smiling, "but I also thought you were impossible to trust," he continued. Now I think maybe I was just afraid. Afraid of what? She asked. Of believing in someone again, he said. Lila's smile faded into something softer. Then let me prove you right this time. He nodded slowly. The wind lifted her hair, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of gulls echoed over the water. It was not forgiveness spoken aloud, but it was there in the air, in the quiet, in the simple act of standing together where everything had once fallen apart. Weeks later, the ocean was alive again with laughter, voices, and color. The Ocean Guardian Foundation had officially reopened, stronger than before. Ethan stood near the tower in his red lifeguard jacket, watching a group of children splashing in the shallows as volunteers taught them how to swim safely. Among the crowd, Lila moved with a camera in her hands, documenting the new outreach program, but this time it was not for a headline. It was for memory. She waved when she caught Ethan's eye, and he smiled back. The distance that had once divided them had become something softer, almost sacred. When the last group of children left, the sun was low, painting the world gold. Lila walked toward him, barefoot in the sand, the same way she had come to him before, but everything between them was different now, real, steady, earned. You rebuilt it, she said, glancing at the restored banner that fluttered above the tower. Ethan shook his head. We rebuilt it. She smiled. So what happens now? He looked out at the horizon. We keep doing what we promised. Saving people. Telling the truth. And us? She asked quietly. Ethan turned to her, eyes warm. No contracts this time, he said. Just honesty. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver pendant shaped like a wave. This was my brother's, he said. He used to say the ocean always brings back what it takes, if you wait long enough. He placed it gently in her palm. I think he was right. Lila closed her fingers around it, her throat tight. You sure about that? She whispered. Completely, he said. The wind caught her hair, carrying the scent of salt and sun. She stepped closer and rested her forehead against his. For the record, she murmured, you were never just a story. And you were never just a mistake, he replied. The tide touched their feet as they stood there, the waves whispering against the shore like the sound of forgiveness. Farther down the beach, one of the children they had taught earlier released a small paper boat into the surf. It bobbed on the water, catching the light as it drifted out to sea, a fragile symbol of something unspoken but understood, that healing always begins where truth finally meets love. As the paper boat disappeared beyond the horizon, Lila whispered, maybe the ocean does remember. Ethan smiled. Then let it remember this. He wrapped his arms around her as the sky turned from gold to violet, the last trace of day fading behind them. No contracts. No secrets. Just two people who had nearly drowned in lies and somehow learned to breathe again. The story that began as a performance ended as a promise. And for once, the ocean was perfectly calm.